Hi, I'm Matt Catterin, and for this class, my final project is going to be on the Cuban Missile Crisis. A couple reasons why I selected this topic. One, I was always interested in the Cold War era of U.S. history. Second, this is obviously the closest the Cold War came to actually escalating into a full-blown nuclear war, which could have and would have been catastrophic for both the United States and the USSR. We used spy surveillance to gain evidence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, which I was always interested in. And this ties into several topics that we've learned so far in class, such as McCarthyism, containment policy, and just generalized post-World War II history. So a brief overview of the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was in October of 1962. The crisis itself lasted for 13 days, from October 16th to the 28th. The Bay of Pigs invasion was widely considered a U.S. failure, and it definitely played into the Cuban Missile Crisis as it strengthened Cuban and Soviet ties, and ultimately led to a U.S.-Soviet compromise, which came in the form of tense negotiations, and led to an agreement that would dismantle the Soviet weapons in Cuba, and the U.S. had to agree not to invade Cuba after. So here's a picture of my article. The journal article is titled "October Missiles and November Elections: The Cuban Missile Crisis and American Politics, 1962." On the left, you have a picture of JFK as he's addressing the nation by television on October 22nd during the Cuban Missile Crisis. On the right, you have Senator William B. Keating using a Minuteman missile model as a pointer. So the argument of Thomas G. Patterson and William J. Brophy, who are the authors of this article, they suggested that based on Republican officials that the Cuban Missile Crisis was hugely politically motivated. A lot of Republicans were saying that it was exaggerated by JFK and Democrats. Although Democrats controlled the Senate and House of Representatives, Kennedy was still unable to pass certain domestic proposals during his time and was very interested in the upcoming midterm elections. The Republicans were successful in making Cuba a troublesome issue for Democrats, but the article details whether or not that was shown in the elections. Here's some quote evidence. Representative Thomas B. Curtis, a Republican from Missouri, was stated as saying the Cuban Missile Crisis was phony and contrived for election purposes. Above it is a picture of the surveillance that showed the missiles in the Soviet missiles anyway in Cuba. Here's the contrary quote evidence, which comes at the end of the article. It says that the effects of the Cuban Missile Crisis seem indiscriminate. The crisis helped some Democrats and hurt some Democrats. In other words, there was no real correlation between the Cuban Missile Crisis and increased popularity among Democrats. How this might be useful for my final project. Obviously, by reading the article, I was able to gain some insight into the political landscape of the early 1960s. I was able to understand the argument from both sides, and I was able to see actual results from the election that showed little to no influence. And here is the Chicago-style citation of my article. Thank you.